Ancient builders across the world might have used the same secret ruler. From the pyramids of Egypt to the stone circles of Britain, separated by thousands of miles and years, the same precise measurements keep appearing. This is the mystery of the lost measurement systems, a forgotten language of length and proportion that could rewrite our understanding of early human connection. By the end of this, you will see every ancient monument as a piece of a single global puzzle. How did builders without modern tools achieve such impossible precision? And why do their numbers whisper of a shared knowledge of the Earth itself? What does it mean when the same unit of measure is found carved into stones on different continents? The answers lie buried in geometry, astronomy, and stone. What do you believe is humanity's oldest shared idea? That first decision, the choice of a single length, echoes through every stone that follows. Before the first block was cut or the first foundation dug, someone had to answer a deceptively simple question. How long is long enough? This act, selecting a standard unit, is the invisible foundation upon which every ancient wonder was built. It transforms random piles into precise pyramids and scattered stones into celestial calendars. At its most basic, a shared measurement allows a community to build together. It means the brick you make will fit the space I prepare. It enables trade because a basket of grain measured by my rod will match the one measured by yours. This is the practical local cubit, born from the length of a forearm, a stride, or the width of a hand. It is human scale, born of the body. But then we encounter something far stranger, a pattern that defies simple practicality. Scattered across the globe, in cultures that history tells us never met, we find units of length that are not just similar, they are essentially identical. These are not the variable measures of a king's foot or a farmer's pace. These are precise, recurring numbers that seem divorced from any local necessity. This is where our mystery truly begins. Why would a builder in ancient Britain, one in Egypt and another in distant Mesoamerica, all settle on the same specific length, down to a fraction of an inch? The researcher John Michell spent a lifetime mapping these ghost units. He proposed that these were not arbitrary. They were chosen deliberately because they reflected something much larger than a single city or kingdom. They were cosmic measures, lengths derived from the dimensions of our planet itself, or from the movements of the sun and moon. Think of it this way. A local cubit helps you build a house. A cosmic measure helps you build a model of the universe. When a unit is tied to the Earth's circumference, or to the precise geometry that governs planetary orbits, the structure you build with it becomes more than a shelter. It becomes a statement, a permanent monument encoding a profound understanding of the world. The building itself becomes an earthly mirror of the heavens, its proportions singing a silent hymn to cosmic order. So the foundational mystery we face is this stark choice. Were these lost systems merely the advanced tools of master engineers, or were they something deeper? A sacred, unifying code, a shared spiritual mathematics written in stone across the face of the ancient world. The answer, it seems, lies not in the purpose of any one building, but in the persistent, haunting repetition of a number. The carpenter's forearm, pressed against a beam of cedar or limestone, is perhaps the oldest measuring tool we know. This simple gesture, the cubit, was a universal language of creation, linking the builder's body directly to his work. From the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the planned cities of the Indus Valley, this unit of a man's elbow to fingertip provided a common human scale. But to dismiss the cubit as merely a convenient rule of thumb is to miss the entire mystery. For within this familiar idea we find a startling split, a clue that what began in the body ended in the stars. In most ancient cultures, the cubit was exactly what it seemed, a practical measure that could vary slightly from town to town. But in Egypt, something extraordinary happened. They developed the Royal Egyptian Cubit, a length of approximately 52.36 centimeters. This was no longer a simple arm's length. It was a precise, standardized instrument, carved from granite and used for the most sacred constructions. The difference between a common cubit and the royal cubit is the difference between a guess and a law. So where did this specific, unforgiving number come from? The answer points not to a pharaoh's whim, but to the curve of the planet itself. Research suggests this cubit was a deliberate fragment of a much grander design. If you take the Earth's polar circumference, that imaginary line running around the globe through the poles, and divide it by 43,200,000, you arrive at a length strikingly close to the royal cubit. This is not a coincidence, it is a calculation. The ancient Egyptians, or the source of their knowledge, appear to have been using a base 60 or sexagesimal mathematical system to slice the earth into meaningful, buildable pieces. 25 of these sacred cubits made another unit called a rod, and the geometry unfolds from there in breathtaking harmony. The proof is etched in stone. Take the Great Pyramid's base perimeter. When measured in these royal cubits, it relates to a specific fraction of the Earth's dimensions, as if the pyramid's footprint is a scale model of a hemisphere. Move inside to the king's chamber and the precision deepens. The room's dimensions are not random, they form a perfect double square, its length, width, and height creating resonant ratios that some researchers link to harmonic frequencies. This chamber, built with cubit rods, becomes more than a tomb. It is a tuned instrument of stone, its proportions singing a silent, mathematical song. So this ubiquitous unit, found in every carpenter's shop, transforms before our eyes. It becomes our first tangible clue, a single note that implies an entire symphony of lost knowledge, a geodetic science that measured the world and built its wonders from the same divine blueprint. The royal cubit whispers of a civilization that measured the earth, but across the sea and thousands of years earlier, a different mystery was taking shape in stone. In the middle of the 20th century, a Scottish engineer named Alexander Thom walked the misty moors of Britain with a theodolite and a notebook. His mission was simple: to measure the ancient stone circles with the precision of a modern surveyor. What he found was not a collection of crude, random monuments, but a network of precise geometry, all built to the same exacting standard. He called his discovery the Megalithic Yard, a unit of 2.722 feet, and it would challenge everything we thought we knew about Neolithic builders. Thom surveyed over 600 sites across Britain and France, from the iconic rings of Stonehenge to remote circles in the Scottish Islands. In site after site, the dimensions of the circles, the spacing of the stones, and the layouts of the sites all seemed to be multiples of this one specific length. The statistical consistency was staggering, with a variation of only about 0.1%. This was not the work of isolated villages using a chief's stride as a measure. This was the signature of a technical tradition, a shared rulebook of construction that spanned an entire continent. So where did this precise number come from? One compelling theory connects it to the swing of a pendulum. A simple pendulum, a weight on a string, that beats out a megalithic yard with each swing, could have been a perfect, reproducible standard for any builder, anywhere. Others see an astronomical origin, a length derived from the observed movements of the sun or moon over a set period. But perhaps the most profound implication is not its origin, but its application. Thom discovered that these builders were not just laying out circles. They were using this megalithic yard to construct sophisticated geometrical shapes within their stone rings, creating perfect Pythagorean triangles and complex egg-shaped formations thousands of years before Pythagoras was born. This means the builders possessed and applied a deep, practical knowledge of mathematics. The stone circles were not just ritual spaces, they were open-air textbooks of geometry, their very shapes teaching and preserving a sacred understanding of number and form. The existence of the megalithic yard forces a dramatic rethink. It suggests a level of communication, shared purpose, and technical sophistication among Neolithic cultures that our history books rarely grant them. It paints a picture of surveyors and engineers, perhaps a guild of learned individuals, traveling across Europe with their standard measures and their celestial knowledge, helping local communities raise monuments that were both locally sacred and globally coherent. This single unit of measure, found from Orkney to Brittany, becomes a second powerful clue. It tells us that long before empires rose, a common language of length and proportion was already uniting the builders of the ancient world, turning isolated landscapes into a connected canvas of cosmic intention. But numbers are more than just lengths, they are the hidden notes in a universal symphony. If the Royal Cubit and the Megalithic Yard are the instruments, then certain recurring numbers are the melodies they play, harmonies that resonate in stone, myth, and the sky itself. This is our third and perhaps most profound clue, a harmonic link that suggests early builders were not just measuring space, they were tuning into the very frequency of the cosmos. Across different cultures and measurement systems, specific numbers appear again and again like a persistent echo. The number 366, for instance, is not just the number of days in a leap year. It appears in ancient myths and, as researcher Robin Heath has explored, in a unique way of dividing the Earth's circle. He connects the megalithic yard to what he calls the megalithic degree, a system where the Earth's rotation is understood through 366 degrees instead of our modern 360. Similarly, the numbers 40 and 12 are everywhere, from the 40 days of flood myths to the 12 labors of Hercules and the 12 tribes of Israel. This repetition is not coincidence, it is a pattern, a harmonic system where mathematics, astronomy, and sacred story were all part of one unified language. The proof is in the geometry. Take 100 megalithic yards, which equals 272.2 feet. This number, 272, is deeply significant. It is a key fraction in the vast, slow wobble of Earth's axis, known as the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle that takes 25,920 years. Now look at Stonehenge, the perimeter of the iconic Sarsen stone circle, that outer ring of massive uprights, measures exactly 100 megalithic yards. This means the builders may have designed this sacred space not just to mark the sunrise, but to encode, in its very circumference, a fingerprint of this grand celestial clock. They were building a model of time on a monumental scale. This harmonic link transforms our understanding of their purpose. Measurement was not merely a tool for construction, it was a bridge. A single unit like the megalithic yard became a converter, translating the immense, abstract cycles of the heavens into a tangible, buildable length here on Earth. The circle of stones was both a local temple and a cosmic calculator, its dimensions a permanent prayer etched in geometry. It tells us that for these ancient architects, there was no separation between the terrestrial and the celestial. To build correctly with the right measures was to align human creation with the divine order of the universe. This deep, harmonic intention would find its ultimate expression not in circles of stone, but in the most iconic shapes of all, the pyramids that seem to reach from the desert floor to touch the stars themselves. The Great Pyramid at dawn is a lesson in light and geometry. As the sun first touches its capstone, the monument's shadow stretches across the desert not as a random shape, but as a precise instrument of time and measurement. This structure is the ultimate expression of those lost systems, a mountain of stone built with the logic of a cosmic calculator. Its perfection begins with a simple, brilliant concept, the seat. In ancient Egyptian architecture, the seat was the fixed ratio that determined a pyramid's slope. It was the guaranteed recipe for its iconic shape. For the Great Pyramid, the chosen seat produced a slope so exact that it encodes one of mathematics' most important constants. If you take the pyramid's base perimeter and divide it by twice its height, the result is a number astonishingly close to pi, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. The builders essentially squared the circle in stone, merging linear and circular geometry in one monumental form. This was not an accident. It was a deliberate, sophisticated fusion of mathematical knowledge and architectural ambition, all executed using their sacred royal cubit. The precision extends in every direction. Each side of the pyramid is aligned to the cardinal points with an error of less than 1/15 of a degree. To achieve this without modern tools or a magnetic compass is an engineering feat that still baffles experts. The 19th century Egyptologist Flinders Petrie spent months meticulously surveying the site. His measurements revealed a level of workmanship so fine that the joints between the massive casing stones were, on average, just 1/50th of an inch wide. This is not the rough work of a primitive culture, it is the signature of a master. Inside the pyramid, the measurement story deepens. The dimensions of the granite coffer in the king's chamber are not round numbers, they are specific fractions of the royal cubit, chosen for a purpose we can still only guess at. The ascending and descending passages are angled with celestial intent, some aligned to the pole star of its era, others pointing to key stars in the constellation Orion. Every corridor, every chamber, every seemingly blank wall follows a proportional rule. Some researchers, looking at the intricate measurements, have even proposed the existence of a pyramid inch, a unit slightly longer than our modern inch that seems to harmonize the structure's dimensions with the Earth's polar radius. Whether that specific unit is proven or not, the overwhelming evidence points to one undeniable truth. The Great Pyramid is a physical archive of a measurement system of breathtaking sophistication. It is a silent testament to a science that integrated astronomy, geography, and sacred geometry into a single, buildable form. This raises the haunting question with even greater force. If this knowledge was so advanced, where did it come from? And if it was unique to Egypt, why do we find echoes of its same mathematical soul in monuments on the other side of the world, built by people who supposedly never shared a word or a map? Across the Atlantic, a different desert holds a parallel secret. In the highlands of Mexico, along the Avenue of the Dead, stand the vast pyramids of Teotihuacan. To a modern eye, the layout is eerily familiar, a grand ceremonial avenue flanked by massive structures, a design that whispers of a purpose far beyond mere city planning. This is not Egypt, but the visual echo is undeniable. A puzzle separated by an ocean and over 1,000 years. The key to unlocking Teotihuacan lies not in its art or artifacts alone, but in the invisible ruler used to build it, a unit modern researchers call the Teotihuacan Measurement Unit. This standard, measuring about 83 centimeters, was the fundamental code from which the entire city was generated. Every plaza, every temple platform, every street width appears to be a whole number multiple of this single length. The Pyramid of the Sun, for instance, has a base side of 216 of these units. That number is not random, it is 6 cubed, a figure of profound significance in ancient numerology and geometry across many cultures. The entire metropolis feels less like an organic growth and more like a precise, pre-planned mathematical diagram stamped onto the landscape. Independent researcher Hugh Harleston Jr. spent years surveying the site with meticulous care. His work suggests something astonishing, that the Teotihuacan Measurement Unit, like the Royal Egyptian Cubit, was a geodetic measure, a fraction of the Earth's dimensions. He proposed that the city's central ceremonial zone was laid out using a standard module based on a specific division of the Earth's polar circumference. When you apply this unit, the city's proportions begin to sing a familiar cosmic song. The Citadel complex, for example, displays dimensions that Harleston argued correspond to ratios of planetary orbits. The distance between the pyramids of the Sun and the Moon might relate to a key astronomical cycle. Whether every precise correlation is validated is debated, but the overarching pattern is compelling. Here, on a continent unknown to the Old World, builders erected a city using a standardized, abstract measurement that seems to encode a sophisticated understanding of scale, both earthly and celestial. They were playing the same harmonic game, just with a different named unit. This parallel development presents us with a mystery of breathtaking scope. Did a common source of knowledge inspire both the Nile and the Valley of Mexico, a forgotten teacher of sacred geometry? Or does this point to something even more fundamental, a shared human intuition, a kind of innate cosmological grammar that different cultures discovered independently when they sought to align their greatest works with the universe? The stones of Teotihuacan do not answer. They simply stand as a silent, monumental question mark, challenging our linear story of human history and suggesting that the language of the measure was once a global tongue. That persistent echo of numbers points toward a source deeper than engineering. For the master builders, geometry was not just a tool, it was a revelation, a sacred language whispered by the universe itself. To understand their measurement systems, we must step into the mind of an ancient philosopher, drawing perfect circles and squares in the sand, convinced these shapes held the very blueprint of creation. This was the world of sacred geometry, where specific, magical ratios were seen as the fingerprints of the divine. Three numbers in particular formed this holy trinity: pi, the square root of 2, and phi, the golden ratio. Their presence in ancient structures is no accident. It is a deliberate inscription of cosmic law into stone. Pi, the constant that defines a circle, was famously encoded in the Great Pyramid slope. The square root of 2, the length of a square's diagonal, governed the proportions of countless altars and temples, creating a shape that could seamlessly transform from a square into a circle. But perhaps the most revered was phi, approximately 1.618. This ratio, where a line is divided so the whole is to the larger part as the larger part is to the smaller, appears throughout nature, in the spiral of a nautilus shell and the arrangement of sunflower seeds. The ancients saw this as the ratio of beauty and life. We find it meticulously crafted into the facade of the Parthenon in Athens, its dimensions singing a hymn to harmonic perfection. The philosopher Plato called geometry the language the Creator used to stamp order upon chaos. For him, these shapes and ratios were not abstract ideas. They were the eternal, perfect forms that our flawed world could only imperfectly mirror. Building with these proportions was an act of devotion, an attempt to make the earthly temple reflect the purity of the heavenly realm. This spiritual pursuit explains the astonishing accuracy they achieved. These builders did not have our decimal system, yet they approximated these irrational, infinite numbers with breathtaking precision using simple, whole number ratios derived from their standard units. A profound example lies in the heart of the Great Pyramid. The King's Chamber is a double square, its length precisely twice its width. If you calculate the diagonal across this room's floor, that length relates to phi. The chamber's very dimensions, measured in royal cubits, create a silent stone equation that resolves into the golden ratio. This reveals the ultimate purpose of their measurement. The cubit rod was more than a ruler, it was a key. The megalithic yard was more than a standard, it was a decoder. These units were chosen because they effortlessly generated the sacred ratios when applied in whole numbers. Measurement became a spiritual endeavor, a ritual act of aligning human work with the eternal mathematics of the cosmos. To build with the correct measure was to speak the language of the gods. But such divine conversation required instruments of impossible precision. The sacred geometry of the King's Chamber required tools of equal precision. How did a crew of ancient workers translate a philosopher's perfect circle into a pyramid's flawless corner? The answer lies not in lost technology, but in the elegant simplicity of knotted ropes and wooden rods, wielded with a profound understanding of the land itself. To see this toolkit in action, we travel to the windswept coast of Brittany, to the sprawling stone rows of Karnak. Here, over 3,000 standing stones stretch for miles in eerie parallel lines. This was not a temple in the traditional sense, but a vast outdoor laboratory of alignment and measurement. Establishing these straight rows across rolling terrain demanded more than just a good eye. It required a reproducible, fail-proof system. The master builders likely began with a simple, brilliant device, the groma, or its precursor. Picture two sighting poles planted firmly in the earth, connected by a taut cord. By peering along this cord, a surveyor could establish a dead straight line across any distance, sighting a third pole to extend the alignment over hills and valleys. This was the foundational act, creating the spine from which all other measurements would flow. But to turn that line into a perfect right angle, to form the squares and rectangles that underpin sacred architecture globally, they employed a universal secret, the 3-4-5 triangle. Take a long rope and tie knots along it at perfectly equal intervals. If you stretch this rope into a triangle with sides of 3 knots, 4 knots, and 5 knots, the angle between the 3-knot and 4-knot sides will be a perfect 90 degrees. This simple, immutable law of Pythagorean geometry, known millennia before the Greek philosopher gave it his name, was the builder's most powerful tool. With a knotted rope, any crew could lay out the perfect corner of a pyramid, the square foundation of a temple, or the rectangular court of a palace. The rope itself became the standard. In Egypt, the harpodonapti, the rope stretchers, were a revered priestly class. Their cords, knotted at intervals matching the royal cubit, were sacred instruments. A rope of 100 cubits stretched into a triangle with sides of 60, 80, and 100 cubits would yield that same perfect right angle on a colossal scale. Similarly, in Britain, a rope knotted at Megalithic Yard intervals would allow the builders of Stonehenge or Karnak to achieve the same precision. The rope was the physical manifestation of the abstract unit, a flexible ruler that could bend around contours yet always deliver mathematical truth. Supporting this were other humble but vital tools: the plumb bob for establishing true verticals, the water level for creating flat planes, and the wooden measuring rod, the personal standard of the master builder. Experimental archaeologists have repeatedly demonstrated that with these tools, a trained team can replicate the alignments and geometries of the most famous ancient sites. The profound knowledge was not in the complexity of the tools, but in the flawless application of simple principles. This practical reality reveals the final, crucial layer of the mystery. Such widespread precision was impossible without a shared system of training. The knowledge of how to knot the rope, which ratios to use, and how to correct for the sag of a long cord, this was specialized, guarded information. It implies schools of learning, apprenticeships, and a tradition passed carefully from one generation of builders to the next. The monuments stand not just as testaments to spiritual belief, but to a curriculum, a lost syllabus of the ancient world that taught how to marry heaven and earth with nothing more than a length of twine and a vision written in the stars. A shaft of winter solstice sunlight still pierces the darkness of Newgrange's inner chamber, a feat of engineering over 5,000 years old. This was not a lucky accident of architecture. It was a precise appointment with the cosmos, written in stone and aligned to the second. For the master builders, astronomy was far more than inspiration. It was the ultimate calibration tool, the grand clock against which all their smaller measures were set. Their units of length did not exist in isolation. They were derived from the immense movements of the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon. The measurement was a way to capture a piece of eternity. This is the celestial code, the practice of using the heavens to define the inch, the foot, and the yard. consider the modern nautical mile, a unit still used by every ship and plane on the planet. It is defined as 1 minute of latitude, 1/60th of a degree of the Earth's curvature. This is not a modern invention. It is the rediscovery of an ancient principle, a return to the idea that the truest ruler is the planet itself. The builders were thinking in the same global terms. Researcher John Michell proposed that the Megalithic Yard might be a tiny fragment of the Earth's polar circumference. If you divide that enormous circle by a specific, elegant number, you get a length very close to that 2.722-foot unit. Similarly, the number 366, linked to leap years and ancient myth, appears in these geodetic calculations, suggesting a system where the Earth's dimensions were understood through a different, perhaps more observationally pure, mathematical lens than our modern 360 degrees. The proof of this celestial partnership is etched into the alignments of the monuments themselves. The Great Pyramid's north-south axis is aligned to true north with an accuracy that rivals modern observatories. This was achieved centuries before the magnetic compass, meaning the builders must have used star transits, patiently tracking the circular path of a star around the celestial pole to find that unwavering line. At Stonehenge, the work of astronomer Gerald Hawkins in the 1960s revealed a complex pattern of alignments. Using early computer analysis, he showed that the arrangement of the stones and arches pointed not just to the solstice sunrises and sunsets, but to key rising and setting points of the moon over its 18.6-year cycle. The monument was a predictive astronomical machine, its very geometry serving as a permanent almanac. By tying their fundamental units to the Earth and their constructions to the sky, the builders created a system that was eternally self-verifying. A cubit based on the planet's size remains true as long as the Earth spins. A temple aligned to the solstice will mark the turn of the year for millennia, its correctness demonstrated every single winter dawn. This practice transcends culture. We see it in the sun dagger of Chaco Canyon, where a sliver of sunlight bisects a spiral petroglyph on the summer solstice. We see it in the precise orientation of Egyptian temples to the star Sirius. This was not isolated genius, it was the hallmark of a coordinated scientific and spiritual tradition. It suggests a global fraternity of sky watchers and earth measurers who understood that to build for the ages, you must first learn to read the clockwork of the heavens. A bustling Bronze Age port hums with a dozen different tongues. Merchants from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Indus Valley gesture over piles of grain, ingots of copper, and bolts of fine linen. In this cacophony, how did they ensure a fair exchange? Beyond spoken language, they relied on a silent, universal translator, standardized weights and measures. A merchant from Ur would place a stone weight on his scale, a Deben weight from Egypt would counterbalance it, and a transaction was sealed without a single shared word. This was measurement as the original medium of global trade. The shekel, the Deben, and similar units of weight and volume became the first true international standards, allowing value to flow across cultures. But what if they traded more than goods? What if, alongside sacks of grain and bars of metal, they exchanged the very ideas of how to measure the world itself? This is the silent trade of knowledge, where length standards may have traveled the same routes as spices and silk, carried not by decree, but by the master builders and priestly scholars who moved with the merchant caravans. We see this process clearly in a later era with the Roman Empire. The Roman foot, a unit of approximately 29.6 centimeters, was stamped across the ancient world from the walls of Britannia to the streets of North Africa. It was a tool of control, a physical imposition of Roman order that standardized construction, taxation, and land division. This shows how a measurement system can be a vector of culture, either adopted willingly for the sake of trade and collaboration or imposed by conquest. But the earlier, more mysterious systems like the Megalithic Yard or the geodetically derived cubits lacked the signature of an empire. their spread seems subtler, more organic. How did a specific unit of length travel from the Scottish Isles to the heart of France, or find echoes across the Mediterranean? Archaeology along ancient trade routes offers clues. The movement of obsidian from specific volcanoes, the distribution of distinctive pottery styles, and the shared symbols found in distant lands all map a web of interconnection that long predates written history. Along these routes traveled not just commodities but people, skilled artisans, and learned individuals. Imagine a master builder, part of a guild or priestly class, journeying with a caravan for protection. At a new settlement, he might be hired not just for his strong back but for his knowledge. He would bring with him his sacred cords knotted at the intervals of his homeland's unit. He would teach local apprentices how to lay out a temple with the correct proportions, how to align a doorway to the rising sun. In doing so, he would silently transplant his culture's measurement system, grafting it onto a new landscape. This was not a conquest but a cultural pollination. The standard became a medium of exchange more valuable than gold because it carried with it a complete system of thought, a way of seeing and structuring the world that connected the local shrine to the motion of the stars. This perspective transforms our understanding of the lost systems. They were not static, isolated inventions, each culture rediscovering the same mathematics from scratch. They were dynamic, flowing knowledge. A unit of measure was a living idea, passed from teacher to apprentice, adapted slightly in new hands, but retaining its core harmonic truth as it journeyed along the invisible highways of the ancient world. This sets the stage for the great cultural crossroads, places where these different streams of measurement and meaning converged, collided, and created something entirely new. The silent highways of trade carried more than goods, they carried the very idea of order itself. And nowhere is this principle of order more perfectly preserved than in the sun-baked bricks of the Indus Valley. Here, along the banks of a great, life-giving river, rose the cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, monuments not to gods or kings, but to an almost mathematical vision of civic life. Their streets are a grid of perfect right angles, laid out with a precision that feels startlingly modern. You will find no towering pyramids here, no vast stone temples reaching for the heavens. Instead, the genius of the Indus builders expressed itself in a different kind of sacred geometry, the geometry of daily living. Their wonder was the planned city itself, a masterpiece of standardization built on a measurement system of elegant simplicity. Archaeologists have uncovered their fundamental unit, a length modern researchers call the Indus inch, measuring about 1.32 of our inches. This was not a casual guess, it was a meticulously observed standard, used to create larger, perfectly decimal units. 10 of these Indus inches made an Indus foot. 100 Indus feet formed a precise measure for laying out city blocks. This decimal, base 10 system feels instinctively familiar to us today, a logical progression that speaks to a culture thinking in clear, scalable terms. But the true testament to their system is found in the most humble of objects, the brick. The fired mud bricks of Mohenjo-Daro are not random. Their dimensions are locked in a perfect, repeating ratio of 4 to 2 to 1. A brick's length is twice its width, and its width is twice its thickness. This modular design meant that a bricklayer could build a wall running north-south or east-west without cutting or shaping a single brick. They simply rotated it. The entire city, with its miles of defensive walls, its granaries, and its sophisticated drainage channels, was assembled from these identical, interchangeable units. It was a civilization built like a child's set of blocks, where every piece fit perfectly by design. This focus reveals a profound shift in the purpose of measurement. For the Egyptians, the cubit built a gateway to the afterlife. For the megalithic cultures, the yard measured the cosmos, but for the Indus people, their inch built a functioning, healthy, and equitable society. Their greatest architectural achievements are not tombs or observatories, but the world's first known urban sanitation systems, with covered drains running beneath streets and sophisticated wells providing clean water. The measurement system served a civic theology, a belief that order, cleanliness, and fairness were the highest expressions of a harmonious world. This enigma broadens our understanding immensely. It proves that the unifying principles of measurement were not solely the property of priestly elites obsessed with the stars. The same drive for precision, the same need for a shared, reproducible standard, could fuel an entirely different societal goal: the creation of a sustainable, peaceful, and meticulously planned urban existence. The Indus cities stand in silent contrast, a powerful reminder that the language of the measure was versatile. It could write hymns to the sun, or it could draft the blueprint for a better life. A different river of order flowed across the Asian continent, where measurement was woven into the very fabric of philosophy and statecraft. In the shadow of the Forbidden City's sweeping roofs, the secret to its harmonious grandeur lies not in a single ruler, but in a repeating spatial module called the Jian. This bay, the space between four columns, was the fundamental cell from which the entire palace complex grew. It was an architecture of rhythm, where size and status were communicated by the number of these identical bays strung together, creating a visual language of power that anyone could understand. This modular thinking represents the heart of a distinct Eastern tradition, one where measurement served a dual master: cosmic balance and imperial administration. The primary unit was the kai, often translated as a Chinese foot. Unlike the static royal cubit, the kai's length shifted with each new dynasty, a resetting of the standard that mirrored the mandate of a new emperor to bring fresh order to the world. But this was no arbitrary change. The kai was frequently calibrated to something both beautiful and precise: the pitch of a musical note. By defining the foot based on the length of a pipe that produced a specific tone, the state tied physical measurement to harmonic law. A builder's ruler and a musician's scale were born from the same principle, ensuring that the empire itself resonated in tune. This system traveled to Japan, evolving into the Shaku, a unit that would govern everything from the terrain to the castle. Here, measurement was inseparable from a worldview shaped by yin and yang and the five elements. Proportions in architecture and design sought to balance these forces, creating spaces that fostered harmony and well-being. A room's dimensions, a garden's layout, even the length of a sword, were all calculated using the Shaku and its fractional units to achieve this celestial equilibrium. The profound integration of this knowledge into daily life was officially codified during China's Song dynasty in a monumental text, the Yingzhou Fashi. This architectural manual did more than list standards. It provided a complete rulebook. It specified the exact dimensions for every beam, bracket, and tile based on the building's grade and the chosen module. A carpenter constructing a pagoda did not need to design each level from scratch. He followed the manual's prescribed formulas, scaling the Jian module and its related components. This meant a pagoda built in the south and another in the north by builders who never met could rise with identical proportions and joinery, a testament to the power of a shared, written system of measure. This Eastern approach enriches our global tapestry immensely. While the West often sought to measure the cosmos directly in stone, the East perfected the measurement of society and space through modular repetition and bureaucratic precision. It was order internalized, a system less about mirroring the vast heavens above and more about orchestrating perfect harmony in the human realm below. The Forbidden City stands not as a pyramid reaching upward, but as a vast horizontal diagram of this philosophy, its countless giant bays like the uniform cells of a majestic, earthly hive. This reveals a stunning truth: the drive to impose order through measurement is universal. but its expression is a mirror of a culture's deepest soul. The rhythmic tramp of a legionary's boot became the heartbeat of an empire. With each measured step along a freshly laid road in Gaul or Britain, a new kind of order was stamped onto the earth, an order defined by a single, unyielding length, the Roman foot. This unit, the pes, measuring approximately 29.6 centimeters, was more than a tool for builders. It was an instrument of control, the very mechanism by which Rome transformed diverse landscapes into a unified, manageable territory. Its story provides our clearest historical example of how a measurement system can be wielded as a deliberate tool of political power, a stark, practical contrast to the earlier, spiritually charged systems. The genius of the Roman approach was its brutal simplicity and relentless consistency. Every major construction project, from the soaring arches of an aqueduct to the straight, militarily precise lines of a frontier fort, was governed by strict dimensional rules based on the pes and its multiples. A standard military camp, or castrum, was a perfect square or rectangle, its dimensions calculated in these units to allow for predictable, rapid deployment of troops and supplies no matter where in the world it was built. The width of a major road, the depth of a sewer, even the plot of land granted to a retired soldier, all were defined by this imperial ruler. This imposed uniformity served a devastatingly efficient purpose. It made the vast, unwieldy empire legible and governable from a single center. To administer taxes, you need to measure land. To move legions, you need standardized roads. To build loyalty, you give veterans standardized farms. The Roman foot made all of this possible. The professionals behind this systematic conquest of space were the agrimensors, the land surveyors. They were the empire's unsung engineers, armed with their iconic tool, the groma. This device, a cross of wood mounted on a pole with plumb bobs hanging from each arm, allowed them to sight perfect right angles and straight lines across any terrain. Marching with the army, they would use the groma and their measuring rods, marked in pes, to lay out the template of a new camp in a matter of hours, transforming wilderness into a miniature, orderly Roman city overnight. In peacetime, they carved up conquered territories into the famous grid system of centuriation, dividing the land into square parcels for colonists. This process was not a gentle integration, it was often a violent overwriting. Local measurement traditions, those sacred cubits or tribal paces tied to the land and its gods, were systematically erased and replaced. The Roman standard did not seek to harmonize with existing systems. It sought to obliterate them, to impose a single, rational logic from above. The legacy of this is etched across Europe and beyond. The footprint of Roman towns still shapes modern city centers, and the routes of their roads still underlie major highways. The Roman foot itself evolved into many of the traditional European units, like the pied in France or the foot in England. This model shows us measurement in its most pragmatic, terrestrial form, a top-down system designed for administration, taxation, and military dominance rather than celestial alignment. It answers the how of empire with cold, geometric precision. Yet its very clarity throws the older mysteries into even sharper relief, for it makes one wonder what force, other than imperial decree, could have spread a sacred unit like the Megalithic Yard with such consistency across a prehistoric continent. The Roman system tells us how an empire measures its domain, but the older, lost systems hint at how a civilization might have once measured its place in the cosmos. The straight roads of Rome did not last forever. With the empire's slow unraveling, that crisp imperial order began to blur at the edges, then to shatter completely. The world did not descend into chaos, but it did fragment into 1,000 local truths. The universal Roman foot, that instrument of control, splintered into a bewildering mosaic of regional measures, the king's foot in one valley, the merchant's ell in the next town over, the farmer's rod based on the length of his own field. This was the Great Unraveling, a dark age gap where the very idea of a shared cosmic standard seemed to evaporate from human memory. If such profound knowledge of the Earth and stars once existed, how could it simply vanish? The answer lies not in a single catastrophe, but in a slow cultural forgetting accelerated by collapse. As large-scale political structures like Rome fractured, the intricate networks that supported specialized knowledge dissolved. The state-sponsored schools for surveyors closed, the long-distance trade routes that carried master builders grew dangerous and fell silent, and the great libraries that served as repositories for this learning faced ruin. The famed Library of Alexandria, with its countless scrolls on geometry, astronomy, and geography, suffered a series of devastating losses over centuries, its collective memory turning to ash and scattered to the winds. This was not merely the loss of books, it was the severing of a living intellectual tradition. The deeper, more troubling shift was a transformation in worldview. The pagan scientific priesthoods of the ancient world, those keepers of celestial secrets who saw the gods in the movements of planets, were gradually supplanted by new religious paradigms with different priorities. The focus turned inward toward salvation and scripture, and away from measuring the earth as a divine act. The cosmic significance of geometry, the idea that a building's proportions could echo the harmony of the spheres, began to sound like a forgotten language, a pagan mystery with no place in the new order. Yet the practical knowledge of how to build did not disappear. It retreated into the shadows, preserved in the closed circles of craft guilds. Stonemasons, carpenters, and cathedral builders passed down their rule of thumb techniques, their secretive layouts, and their guarded measuring rods from master to apprentice. These traditions, which some see echoed in later Masonic lore, kept the flame of practical geometry alive. They could still raise a soaring Gothic arch or lay out a perfect foundation, but the original why behind their most potent numbers often faded. The master mason knew his module made the building strong and beautiful, but the connection of that module to the circumference of the earth or the precession of the equinoxes was lost to him. The geodetic meaning had evaporated, leaving behind only the powerful, effective form. This period of fragmentation explains the very condition of lost knowledge. The systems did not vanish entirely, they shattered. The unified language broke into dialects, and the grand cosmic narrative behind the measurements survived only in fragments, in folk tales about giants who built with stone, in the persistent use of the rod or perch in field measurement, and most enduringly, in the immutable dimensions of the ancient monuments themselves. While kings argued over the length of their personal foot, the Great Pyramid's base perimeter quietly continued to express a fraction of the planet's size, and Stonehenge's Sarsen Circle still held its 100 megalithic yards, waiting like a sealed message for a time when someone would think to measure the world again and listen for the echo. Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is a compass of flesh, a body inscribed within a circle and a square. In a quiet Florentine studio, this drawing was not merely an anatomical study, it was a declaration of faith. The Renaissance was dawning, and with it came a feverish hunger to recover the lost wisdom of antiquity. After centuries of fragmented local measures, the human mind turned once more toward the idea of a universal rule. This was the first great wave of rediscovery, a passionate, sometimes misguided search for the perfect numbers that had built the classical world. Artists, architects, and scholars became detectives, scouring the ruins of Rome not for treasure but for proportion. Filippo Brunelleschi, facing the seemingly impossible task of vaulting the enormous dome of Florence's cathedral, turned directly to the source. He traveled to Rome and spent years measuring the ruins of the Pantheon, studying the curvature of its ancient concrete dome. He was reverse engineering a lost technology, seeking the silent grammar that allowed stone to soar. His success was a triumph of recovered knowledge, a direct line from Roman engineering to a new Renaissance skyline. But this revival was driven by more than practical need. It was a philosophical revolution. Scholars were steeped in the rediscovered texts of Hermeticism and Neoplatonism, philosophies that taught that the universe was constructed from divine geometry, and that number was the language of creation. To recover the proportions of a Roman temple was to touch the mind of God. The architect and theorist Leon Battista Alberti codified this quest in his seminal work, De Reedificatoria. He argued passionately that beauty was not a matter of taste but an objective law, achieved through the harmonic ratios found in nature and in the great works of the ancients. He spoke of the same numbers that fascinated the pyramid builders, ratios like the golden mean, which he believed could instill harmony in the soul of anyone who beheld a building designed with them. Yet, for all its brilliance, this Renaissance revival had a profound blind spot. The scholars and artists of the 15th and 16th centuries were searching for aesthetic and philosophical perfection. They sought the beautiful number, the harmonic ratio that pleased the eye and reflected cosmic order. What they largely missed was the geodetic root, the astonishing possibility that these same beautiful numbers were also units of earthly measurement derived from the planet's very dimensions. They recovered the music of the spheres, but not the ruler that had been used to map the sphere itself. They saw the Vitruvian man as a metaphor for microcosm and macrocosm, but did not yet suspect that the circle around him might be scaled to the Earth's circumference. This distinction is crucial. The Renaissance mind re-enthroned geometry as the queen of arts and sciences, but it interpreted the ancient wisdom through a primarily symbolic and artistic lens. The focus was on recreating the effect, the feeling of harmony, rather than uncovering the original, practical science that may have linked a building's footprint to a minute of latitude. Still, their work was the essential first step. By insisting that ancient ruins held a superior, timeless truth, by meticulously measuring them and writing new rulebooks based on their proportions, Alberti, Brunelleschi, and Da Vinci planted an indispensable seed. They re-established the idea that there were universal principles of design, waiting to be decoded from stone. This intellectual foundation, this renewed belief in a lost golden age of knowledge, would eventually compel a later, more scientifically minded age to pick up the tape measure once more, and to ask not just if a column was beautiful, but if its width might be a forgotten fragment of a global standard. The Renaissance's quest for beauty in number set the stage for a far more rigorous investigation. By the 18th century, the spirit of the Enlightenment demanded not just inspiration from the ancients, but cold, hard data. This was the birth of modern metrology, the science of measurement, and its first great mission was ironically to replace all the old, chaotic units with a single, rational, universal standard born from nature itself. The savants of the French Academy, in the wake of their revolution, sought to sweep away the king's foot and the farmer's perch forever. They proposed a magnificent new unit, the meter, defined as 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator, measured along a meridian through Paris. It was a declaration that the Earth itself should be humanity's only ruler. To establish this, they launched a heroic 7-year geodetic survey to measure this meridian arc with unprecedented precision. The undertaking was a triumph of Enlightenment science, but it also produced a stunning, unintended revelation. When the meter was finally cast in platinum, scholars could not help but compare it to the ancient units they were trying to obsolete. They found, to their astonishment, that the old Egyptian Royal Cubit seemed to relate to the same meridian, as if it were a different, perhaps more elegant, fraction of the Earth's quadrant. The moderns, in their quest to invent a perfect measure, had accidentally provided evidence that the ancients might have already achieved one. This scientific turn was built upon the work of earlier pioneers who braved deserts and skepticism to take the first precise measurements of the ancient world. In the 1600s, the English astronomer John Greaves traveled to Egypt with a specific goal: to measure the Great Pyramid not as a wonder, but as a scientific object. Using early precision instruments, he carefully surveyed its dimensions and published his findings, providing Europe with its first reliable data set that moved beyond myth and speculation. His work caught the attention of a towering intellect, Sir Isaac Newton. Newton was deeply interested in the history of ancient measures, particularly the sacred cubit. He suspected that a true understanding of these units could shed light on the dimensions of the Temple of Solomon, and by extension, on ancient cosmology. He pored over Greaves' data, attempting to correlate the cubit with other historical units, treating the puzzle as a complex equation in historical metrology. But it was in the late 19th century that the foundation for all modern study was laid by the meticulous Flinders Petrie. Arriving at Giza with the mindset of a surveyor and the patience of an archaeologist, Petrie spent months using state-of-the-art theodolites and steel tapes to measure every stone, corridor, and angle of the Great Pyramid. His results were published to the inch, and they revealed a level of precision that was frankly shocking. The pyramid's base was nearly a perfect square, its sides aligned to true north with minuscule error, and the joints between its casing stones were finer than the best modern jewelry work. Petrie's data transformed the pyramid from a symbol of mystery into a database of mathematical intent. This era, from Greaves to Petrie, changed everything. It replaced romantic speculation with calipers and calculation. The hard numbers they collected, the lengths and ratios etched in their field notebooks, provided the undeniable empirical bedrock upon which the revolutionary theories of the 20th century could be built. Now, for the first time in centuries, someone could look at a number from a pyramid and a number from a stone circle and ask with scientific legitimacy if they were fragments of the same forgotten equation. The raw data from Petrie's theodolite was a locked door, and Alexander Thom would find the key. In the austere years following the Second World War, this Oxford professor of engineering did something that seemed almost eccentric at the time. He packed his precision surveying equipment and traveled to the remote Scottish island of Lewis, not to build anything new, but to measure what had stood for millennia. His target was the Callanish stone circle, a haunting arrangement of monoliths on a windswept headland. Thom approached these stones not as an archaeologist steeped in theory, but as an engineer confronting a problem of extraordinary precision. With his theodolite and steel tape, he began to map the site down to the centimeter, and what he found defied all expectations of Neolithic capability. The circle was not a rough approximation. Its geometry was flawless, a complex arrangement of ellipses and flattened circles constructed with a mathematical sophistication that should not have existed in that era. This was not an isolated discovery. For decades, Thom would survey over 600 megalithic sites across Britain and France. He measured the diameters of circles, the spacing between stones, the lengths of sightlines. And when he compiled this mountain of data, a stunning pattern emerged. The dimensions were not random. They clustered around multiples of a single, precise unit, which he named the Megalithic Yard, measuring 2.722 feet. The statistical consistency was overwhelming, with a variation of less than 0.1% across the entire dataset. This was not the work of isolated tribes using a chieftain's stride. It was the signature of a technical tradition, a continent-wide rulebook written in stone and earth. Thom's hypothesis was seismic. He argued that Neolithic Britain was not a land of primitive farmers, but home to a society of astronomer priests, a learned class who possessed advanced knowledge of geometry, could make precise astronomical observations, and who traveled from community to supervise the construction of these cosmic monuments. His work, published in dense academic papers, was a revolution in metrology, but it was a cold, numbers-driven revolution. It took another mind, that of John Michell, to set those numbers on fire with meaning. Michell was a writer and visionary who saw the patterns Thom had uncovered not as isolated data points, but as fragments of a global language. In his seminal 1969 book, The View over Atlantis, he performed a breathtaking synthesis. He connected Thom's Megalithic Yard to the ancient Egyptian Royal Cubit, to Chinese units, to the dimensions of classical temples, and to the very geometry of the Earth itself. Michell proposed that these were not separate systems, but local dialects of a single, lost science of geodetic measurement, a sacred geometry used to align human structures with the underlying order of the cosmos. He framed the prehistoric landscape of Britain as a vast, planned network of temples and ley lines, an Atlantean memory of a golden age when humanity lived in harmonic accord with the planet. The reaction from mainstream archaeology was swift and deeply skeptical. Thom's meticulous data was hard to dismiss outright, but the implications were profoundly uncomfortable. Critics argued that the statistical clustering could be a coincidence, or that Thom's own methods might have unconsciously influenced his results. The idea of a prehistoric scientific network of highly trained surveyors roaming Neolithic Europe challenged the foundational narrative of human progress as a slow, linear climb from simplicity. Michell's grand synthesis was dismissed as romantic, mystical speculation, a work of poetic fancy rather than hard science, yet the core evidence refused to go away. Later researchers like Christopher Knight and Alan Butler would build upon this foundation, conducting their own surveys and uncovering even more precise numerical relationships. They explored how the Megalithic Yard and other ancient units seemed to encode not just the Earth's size, but also the ratios of the Moon and Sun, creating what they called a prehistoric metric system of staggering sophistication. The controversy itself became a defining feature of the 20th century's engagement with the mystery. On one side stood institutional archaeology, cautious and bound by established paradigms. On the other stood a growing body of independent researchers, engineers, and historians, armed with tape measures and calculators, pointing to the undeniable, repeating numbers in the stones. This era did more than just identify a unit of measure. It fundamentally reframed the entire question. It transformed the lost systems from a collection of curious antiquarian footnotes into the potential evidence for a prehistoric scientific network. The hypothesis suggested that long before empires, before written history, a shared pursuit of cosmic understanding may have linked cultures across the globe, their legacy not in parchments or artifacts, but in the immutable, measured silence of standing stone. This was no longer a search for a ruler, but for the civilization that once held it. From a satellite's perspective, the Earth is a silent blue marble, but plot the locations of its ancient wonders and a startling pattern emerges. Lines of latitude and longitude, those imaginary grids we take for granted, seem to intersect with uncanny purpose at the sites of humanity's oldest monuments. This visual connection forms the heart of the geodetic argument, the most profound and controversial claim of all, that these lost measurement systems were not just for building temples, but for mapping the planet itself. The theory suggests the builders possessed a forgotten science of Earth measurement, and they deliberately placed their grandest structures as permanent markers in a global survey, encoding the dimensions of the world in stone. To understand this, we must think like they might have, starting with the circle. The Earth is a sphere, and its circumference is its most fundamental dimension. The modern nautical mile is still defined as 1 minute of arc, 1/60th of a degree of that circumference. This is a geodetic unit, a piece of the planet. Now follow a chain of calculations that many researchers find hauntingly elegant. Take the Earth's polar circumference, divide it by 360 degrees. That gives you 1 degree of latitude. Divide that degree by 60 minutes. That gives you 1 arc minute, our nautical mile. Now divide that arc minute by 600, the number used in the ancient Babylonian base 60 system. The result is a length strikingly close to the modern British foot. This is not a random number game. It is a logical, fractional slicing of the globe using the sexagesimal mathematics the ancients favored. It implies that our common foot may be a faint, surviving echo of a much older, Earth-derived standard. The Great Pyramid of Giza offers what some see as the ultimate piece of evidence for this global consciousness. Its geographic placement appears meticulously chosen. It sits at the intersection of the longest land parallel, the line of latitude that crosses the maximum amount of the Earth's landmass, and the longest land meridian, the line of longitude that does the same. This precise spot makes the pyramid a natural geodetic center, a fixed point from which the Earth's surface could be conceptually divided. Furthermore, the pyramid's own dimensions, when measured in its royal cubits, produce numbers that relate directly to the Earth's measurements. The perimeter of its base, for instance, corresponds to exactly half a minute of latitude at the equator, a scale model of the planet's curvature. These correlations have drawn the attention of professional geodesists and cartographers over the years. While many remain cautious, some acknowledge the mathematical precision is too consistent to be easily dismissed as coincidence. They point out that achieving such alignments, both in the monument's location and its proportions, would require an advanced understanding of spherical geography, the ability to determine true north and south with extreme accuracy, and a concerted, long-term project to memorialize that knowledge. If even a fraction of this geodetic argument holds true, the historical implications are staggering. It suggests a prehistoric civilization or a network of interconnected cultures capable of a coordinated global surveying project of immense scale and sophistication. It means the pyramids, stone circles, and great mounds were not isolated wonders, but interconnected nodes in a planetary design. A literal world-wide web of sacred geometry written not in code, but in latitude, longitude, and stone. This vision rewrites the narrative of human discovery, placing the first true map of the world not on parchment, but on the landscape itself, built by hands thousands of years ago. Such a monumental claim, however, cannot stand without facing the fierce winds of skepticism. A packed lecture hall falls silent as the keynote speaker adjusts his notes. He represents the formidable voice of mainstream archaeology, and his mission today is to dismantle what he calls the seductive myths of ancient metrology. His first target is the most common critique, the charge of numerology. With a series of sharp slides, he demonstrates how easy it is to find seemingly meaningful numbers in any complex structure if you are determined enough. By mixing different units, selecting favorable fractions, and ignoring measurements that do not fit, you can make almost any monument appear to encode pi, phi, or the speed of light. The Great Pyramid alone has been claimed to contain dozens of these cosmic numbers, many of them mutually exclusive. This, the speaker argues, is not evidence of ancient knowledge, but a classic case of cherry-picking data to support a predetermined, often mystical conclusion. It is a pattern-seeking human brain imposing order on random noise. Then he presents the argument from common sense and human scale. Is it really so surprising, he asks, that cultures separated by oceans might arrive at similar lengths? The human body is a universal constant. The average stride, the span of an outstretched arm, the width of a hand, these provide a natural, intuitive toolkit. A pace of about 2.5 feet is a comfortable walking measure for most adults, which could independently evolve into units like the Megalithic Yard or the Roman pace. The so-called golden ratio appears in nature, in shells and flower petals, so its aesthetic appeal might have been discovered separately by artists and architects worldwide, not transmitted from a single lost source. This concept is known as independent invention, the idea that similar solutions to similar problems, like building large stable structures or creating pleasing proportions, can emerge spontaneously in different times and places without any contact. The most rigorous skepticism, however, comes from statistics. A critic might acknowledge that Alexander Thom's data on the megalithic yard is precise, but question his interpretation. Could the apparent standard unit be a statistical artifact, a central tendency emerging from many rough measurements that simply cluster around a common average? Furthermore, if you survey hundreds of sites, you are bound to find some that align to celestial events purely by chance. The anthropic principle applies here. We only notice and study the sites that survived and that appear aligned, while ignoring the thousands that do not fit the pattern. This perspective does not dismiss the skill of the ancients, but it firmly grounds their achievements in local, practical genius rather than a global conspiracy of knowledge. Even experts sympathetic to the geometry urge caution. Scholars like Keith Critchlow, who deeply studied the sacred geometry of Islamic and Gothic design, readily acknowledge the sophisticated use of number and proportion in ancient monuments. He would agree that the builders of Stonehenge or the Parthenon were brilliant geometers, but he would draw a sharp line at the claim of a single, prehistoric global network. The evidence for direct cultural transmission across continents, he might argue, is simply not there in the archaeological record. The similarities could stem from a shared human cognitive architecture, a universal intuition for harmony and balance that finds similar expression in stone, not from a shared textbook. This balanced skeptical view is not a dismissal but a necessary intellectual filter. It forces us to ask harder questions. Are we seeing a true signal from the past, or are we, in our desire for a lost golden age, projecting a pattern onto the randomness of history? The answer likely lies not at the extremes, but in a nuanced middle ground, where incredible human ingenuity meets the slow, complex diffusion of ideas along forgotten trade routes, all under the same watchful sky. This scrutiny does not erase the mystery, it refines it, pushing us to look beyond easy answers for a truth that is both more human and perhaps even more profound. The courtroom of history is now in session, and the central dilemma is this: did the same ideas of measurement and geometry arise independently in distant lands, or did they travel? This is the great debate between independent invention and cultural diffusion, and the lost measurement systems stand as the key evidence on the stand. The prosecution, representing independent invention, presents a compelling case from human nature itself. All people, they argue, share the same basic cognitive toolkit. We all have bodies, so we all naturally derive measures from the forearm, the foot, or the stride. We all live under the same sun and moon, so observing their cycles and building alignments to mark them is a universal response to the sky. The need for stable construction leads independently to the discovery of the 3-4-5 triangle and strong geometric forms. The golden ratio's appearance in nature makes its aesthetic appeal a likely convergent discovery, not a transmitted secret. In this view, the pyramids of Egypt and the Americas are not evidence of contact, but monuments to parallel genius, brilliant solutions arising separately to the same human challenges of meaning, stability, and celestial order. The defense, advocating for diffusion, counters with the haunting consistency of the numbers themselves. They point to the uncomfortable precision, the way the Royal Cubit and the Megalithic Yard seem to be fragments of the same geodetic pie, suggesting a shared source of calculation, not just similar intuition. They introduce evidence of long-distance prehistoric contact that mainstream history often underestimates. The Phoenicians, master sailors of the ancient Mediterranean, are known to have traded for tin as far as Britain centuries before the Romans. Could they have carried more than goods? Could the ideas of Eastern geometry have traveled west on their ships? More controversial are the potential trans-Pacific links. the similarities in art, pyramid construction, and certain plants that lead some researchers to speculate about intermittent, perhaps accidental, voyages between Asia and the Americas long before Columbus. These are not claims of massive colonization, but of sporadic, transformative contact, where a shipwrecked sailor or a small group of travelers could introduce a powerful new idea, a way of measuring and seeing the world that then takes root and evolves in a new land. This debate has an extreme wing known as hyperdiffusionism, the theory that all high culture stems from a single, lost source, often imagined as Atlantis or another advanced progenitor civilization. This idea, while captivating, is fraught with logical flaws. It tends to diminish the incredible ingenuity of indigenous cultures worldwide, casting them as mere inheritors rather than innovators. It also struggles to explain the vast diversity of human cultural expression. A more plausible model lies in the middle, a world of intermittent contact and slow diffusion along the invisible highways of trade, migration, and exploration. Knowledge, especially the practical, guarded knowledge of a master builder, is a precious commodity. It could have traveled with itinerant craftsmen, been exchanged as a royal gift between courts, or been preserved by priestly castes who saw it as sacred. A single individual with a knotted rope and a head full of astronomical ratios could have sparked a revolution in building practice on a distant shore. The lost measurement systems, therefore, do not demand a single answer. They sit at the heart of a deeper, more profound question about the texture of the ancient world. Was it a collection of isolated lanterns, each burning bright on its own hill? Or was it a dimly lit web where ideas, like faint sparks, could travel along threads of connection we are only beginning to trace? The stones hold the measurements, but they keep silent on how the ruler was passed from hand to hand. The search for a perfect measure did not end with the fall of ancient empires. It simply slept for a time, waiting for a new age of reason to awaken it. Today, that quest has achieved its most complete expression. A system that binds the entire world together in a silent agreement of length and mass. We call it the metric system, and its story is a direct, stunning parallel to the very mysteries we have been exploring. Its original definition was not born from a king's foot or a farmer's stride, but from the earth itself. In 1791, the French Academy of Sciences, inspired by Enlightenment ideals, defined the meter as 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator along a meridian passing through Paris. This was a deliberate geodetic act. They were doing precisely what the ancient builders are suspected of doing, deriving a fundamental unit from the dimensions of the planet. It was a conscious effort to create a measure that was universal, rational, and divorced from the arbitrary whims of local tradition. For over a century, a platinum iridium bar stored in a vault near Paris was the physical embodiment of this ideal, the standard meter against which all others were calibrated. But science did not stop there. As our understanding of the universe deepened, a problem emerged. The Earth, it turns out, is not a perfect static sphere. It wobbles slightly on its axis, and even its circumference can be measured with ever-increasing precision, meaning the geodetic definition was tied to a slightly moving target. The quest for a perfect, unchanging constant continued. In 1983, humanity took the final, logical step in this ancient journey. The meter was redefined not by the Earth but by the cosmos. It became the distance light travels in a vacuum in 1/299,792,458th of a second. The speed of light is a universal constant, true everywhere in the universe, unchanging and eternal. We had finally found our modern cosmic standard. This evolution from a body-based cubit to an earth-based meter to a light-based meter is not a break from the past. It is the fulfillment of the same profound impulse that drove the builders of Stonehenge and Giza. It is the human desire to anchor our creations, our commerce, and our understanding of reality to something greater than ourselves, to a truth that is not local or temporary but fundamental. The ancient master builder sought to harmonize his temple with the music of the spheres. The modern scientist seeks to calibrate his instruments to the immutable laws of physics. Both are acts of faith in an ordered universe, and both use measurement as the bridge. This modern resonance validates the core intuition behind the lost systems. It tells us that the drive to find a non-arbitrary, universal measure is not a fringe idea or a mystical fancy. It is a central thread in the story of human civilization. When we look at the Platinum Bar in Paris or contemplate the definition by light, we are witnessing the same quest that once led a surveyor to knot a rope at precise intervals, or an astronomer priest to align a monolith to the solstice sunrise. We are still trying to speak the universe's language, to find the ruler that was used to write reality itself. Our tools have changed from stone and cord to lasers and atomic clocks, but the song we are listening for is very, very old. The quiet hum of a laser scanner now joins the wind on the ancient moor. In a university laboratory, a monitor glows with a stone circle, not as a photograph, but as a perfect digital ghost composed of millions of precisely plotted points in space. This is the new frontier of the mystery, where digital archaeology is providing tools to measure the past with an accuracy that would have left even Alexander Thom in awe. We are no longer limited by a tape measure's sag or a theodolite's line of sight. We can now capture entire landscapes and monuments in 3 dimensions, down to the millimeter, and interrogate the data for patterns invisible to the naked eye. The key technologies driving this revolution are LiDAR, photogrammetry, and geographic information systems, or GIS. LiDAR works by firing millions of laser pulses from an aircraft, piercing dense forest canopies to map the ground surface beneath, revealing hidden earthworks, lost roads, and the full extent of ceremonial complexes. Photogrammetry uses overlapping photographs from drones or ground cameras to build similarly precise 3-dimensional models, capturing every crack and contour of a standing stone. Once these digital twins are created, they are imported into GIS software, a powerful digital cartography platform that allows researchers to analyze spatial relationships on a colossal scale. They can test alignments across dozens of sites, calculate sightlines over hundreds of miles, and search for geometric patterns with computational rigor. This means Thom's hypothesis about the megalithic yard can be tested anew, not on a few hundred manually surveyed sites, but on thousands of digitally captured points, with algorithms searching for statistical clustering free from human bias. Recent studies have done exactly this. Teams have returned to British henges with laser scanners, re-measuring the perimeters and stone placements. Early results often show a remarkable thing. The dimensions still cluster around whole numbers of Thom's proposed unit, but the digital data reveals even more subtle complexities, like intentional irregularities that might encode specific astronomical observations. In Mesoamerica, researchers have used photogrammetry to create perfect models of pyramid stairways and temple platforms at sites like Teotihuacan. By analyzing these models, they can search for the Teotihuacan measurement unit with new precision, examining whether the modularity proposed by researchers like Harleston holds true across the entire city plan, not just its major monuments. One powerful technique involves feeding the precise coordinates of a structure's corners into software that searches for a common divisor, a mathematical process that can objectively propose the most likely original unit of measure used by the builders. This technological lens is objective and unblinking. It does not care for romantic theories of Atlantis or golden ages. It simply records the facts of dimension and placement with icy clarity. This is its great gift and its great challenge. It provides a neutral court of appeal. It can potentially confirm the astonishing precision of the ancients, validating that their repeated numbers were deliberate. Or it might refute certain claims, showing that some celebrated alignments are statistical flukes, or that proposed units do not fit the data as neatly as once thought. Either outcome advances our understanding. The digital record becomes a permanent, shareable artifact, allowing experts worldwide to examine the same dataset, debate its meaning, and build a consensus grounded in measurable reality. The stones have held their secrets for millennia, but now we have new eyes with which to see them, not with imagination, but with the boundless, patient light of a laser. Thom, that tiny hero of fairy tales, left his name as a permanent mark on our rulers. His story is a playful echo of a profound truth, that our deepest cultural ideas about order and size are preserved not just in stone, but in the very words we speak and the stories we tell. The lost measurement systems have a living legacy, one that whispers to us from mythology, folklore, and everyday language, proving this quest was never just about engineering, but about how we define our world and our place within it. Consider the humble origins of common phrases. A rule of thumb did not come from vague estimation. It likely originated from the use of the thumb's width, or the first joint, as a rough, readily available unit for carpenters and brewers. The foot of a poem measures its rhythm in a beat that mimics the human step. A milestone literally marked 1,000 paces of a Roman soldier, a mil passus on the road of empire. These are not dead metaphors, they are linguistic fossils, preserving the physical reality of ancient standards in our modern conversation. They remind us that measurement began in the body and lived on the tongue. This connection deepens dramatically when we turn to the grand myths of creation. Across cultures, storytellers describe the universe being fashioned from the body of a cosmic being. In the ancient Sanskrit hymns of the Rig Veda, the giant Purusha is sacrificed by the gods, and from his parts the entire world is made. The Brahmins, or priestly class, came from his mouth, the warriors from his arms, the merchants from his thighs, and the laborers from his feet. But this is more than a social allegory, it is a cosmological blueprint. Scholars of comparative mythology note that Purusha is described as encompassing all of space, past, present, and future. His body becomes the literal measure of the cosmos, a concept known as the world measure. This idea resonates far beyond India. In Norse myth, the giant Ymir's flesh forms the earth, his blood the seas, his bones the mountains. In a Chinese legend, the giant Pangu holds apart heaven and earth until his body transforms into the landscape upon his passing. These recurring themes suggest a primal, symbolic understanding that the proportions of the human form, scaled to a divine level, provide the template and the units for the universe itself. The myth is a narrative expression of the same principle that guided the builders, a belief that the microcosm of the body reflects the macrocosm of the world. Expert mythologists like Joseph Campbell and Mircea Eliade have explored how such stories function as maps of meaning. They argue that in traditional societies, establishing order meant imposing a sacred geometry upon the chaos of the unknown. The act of measuring, of laying out a temple or a city according to divine proportions, was a ritual reenactment of that primordial ordering of the cosmos from the body of the god. The measuring cord of the priest was a symbolic umbilicus connecting the human project directly back to the moment of creation. This transforms our view of the ancient surveyor. He was not merely a technician, he was a ritual specialist performing a sacred drama with rope and rod to ensure that the community's home was a legitimate part of the cosmic order. The measurements he used were therefore sacred, charged with the power to make space holy and time meaningful. This is why standardizing a measure was often the prerogative of kings and priests. It was an act of defining reality for their people. The legacy of this worldview is still subtly embedded in how we think. we speak of gauging a situation, weighing our options, and taking the measure of a person. We seek a balance in life and hope our actions will measure up. This linguistic substrate reveals that the concepts of proportion, comparison, and standard are foundational to human judgment and ethics. The quest for a unified measurement system was at its heart, a quest for a unified understanding, a common language with which to describe reality, trade fairly, build collaboratively, and orient ourselves spiritually. It was about creating a shared identity under a common sky, using numbers and lengths as the grammar. So when we hear the fairy tale of Thom or recite a line of poetic meter, we are not just entertaining ourselves or appreciating art. We are touching the last, faint vibrations of a once thunderous idea that to measure the world correctly was to participate in its deepest harmony, a cultural memory written not in monuments, but in the very marrow of our stories. That persistent echo of the megalithic yard is a quiet revolution. It forces us to dismantle a deeply ingrained image, the so-called primitive builder. For generations, our cultural imagination has painted the Neolithic world as a place of simple subsistence, where scattered communities of farmers struggled for survival, their greatest architectural achievements being little more than rough circles of stone or humble mounds of earth. The evidence of these precise, continent-wide measurement systems shatters that picture completely. It replaces it with something far more sophisticated, a vision of coordinated societies that possessed not just the will to build, but the organized knowledge to do so with breathtaking mathematical intent. This suggests the existence of a specialized class, a guild of learned individuals who are part surveyor, part astronomer, and part priest. These were the keepers of the standard. They would have undergone rigorous standardized training, learning to read the sky, to manipulate the sacred geometry of the 3-4-5 triangle with knotted ropes, and to reproduce the exact unit of measure, whether it was the megalithic yard or the royal cubit, with flawless consistency. Their knowledge was likely an oral and practical tradition, passed from master to apprentice in a sacred chain of custody, blending technical skill with spiritual meaning. This was not science as we know it in sterile laboratories. It was a prehistoric scientific tradition, holistic and integrated, where measuring the land was inseparable from honoring the gods that moved the sun and stars. The monuments they left behind were not the first fumbling attempts at architecture. They were the PhD theses of their age, final projects demonstrating a complete command of a complex, established curriculum. This realization delivers a profound blow to the linear model of human progress, the comforting story that technology and knowledge accumulate in a straight, ever-upward line from simple to complex. The existence of this lost metrology suggests something far more dynamic and haunting, a landscape of history dotted with peaks and valleys. It implies that certain zeniths of technical and geodetic understanding were reached, mastered, and applied on a grand scale, long before the philosophers of Greece or the engineers of Rome. Then, through the slow unraveling of social networks, the loss of centralized institutions, or a shift in cultural priorities, that integrated knowledge fragmented and faded, surviving only in broken fragments within craft guilds and folk memory. The Dark Ages were not an empty void between classical eras, they were a period of forgetting. This reframes the entire narrative of ancient human connection. It asks us to look at the distribution of these standard units not as proof of a single, monolithic superculture, but as evidence of a wide, likely loose, network of shared ideas. Imagine it not as a centralized empire with a ruler, but as a kind of intellectual climate, a prevailing wind of concepts that could blow along trade routes carried by those itinerant master builders. A community in Orkney might never have met a community in Brittany, but both could have been visited by different members of the same learned tradition, individuals who carried the same conceptual toolkit and applied it to local sacred projects. This transforms our view of ancient peoples from isolated tribes building in solitude to potential participants in a vast, slow conversation. They were nodes in a network, separated by miles but connected by a common pursuit of cosmic order, using the same language of length and angle to ask the same eternal questions of the sky. The stones were their shared text, and we are only now learning how to read the numbers written in their silent, enduring lines. The stones have given us their numbers, but they guard their origins in perfect silence. As this investigation draws toward its close, we are left not with a solved equation, but with a map of mysteries, each one a frontier for future discovery. The evidence of a shared, profound language of measure is compelling, yet the central questions remain tantalizingly open, transforming this from a historical puzzle into a living field of inquiry. Was there a single, original mother system, a pristine source from which all others flowed, or were these units born from a convergent understanding of a harmonic universe? How exactly was this intricate knowledge transmitted across continents and preserved through millennia without a central authority? The mechanisms of this silent trade, the journeys of the master builders, are still hidden in the unrecorded spaces between our known history. And perhaps most thrilling of all, what other sites, currently submerged by rising seas or still buried beneath jungle and desert, hold the missing pieces of this global code? The search is far from over. It is accelerating with new tools and new minds. Archaeologists are now surveying the drowned landscapes of Doggerland, the vast plain that once connected Britain to mainland Europe. Using sonar and sediment cores, they are mapping this lost world, searching for structures that could reveal the spread of the Megalithic Yard system in a now vanished territory. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the stunningly ancient stone circles continue to be analyzed, their precise layouts scrutinized for evidence of a very early, sophisticated geometric tradition that predates even agriculture. The site's T-shaped pillars, erected over 11,000 years ago, may yet yield new clues about the dawn of systematic measurement. Meanwhile, the power of distributed discovery is being harnessed through citizen science. Projects invite the public to examine high-resolution satellite imagery, scanning for geometric patterns, potential alignments, and undiscovered earthworks that traditional archaeology might miss. Anyone with an internet connection can now become a surveyor, looking for the subtle signatures of this lost science in the landscape. This collaborative spirit is key because the mystery of the lost measurement systems does not belong to any single discipline. It calls for a coalition of minds, historians who understand cultural context, archaeologists who can excavate with precision, engineers who can model stress and strain, and astronomers who can calculate ancient skies. It requires us to think both logically and imaginatively, to respect data while daring to ask bigger questions. The story is not closed. It is actively being written with every new survey, every digital model, and every fresh look at an old stone. These ancient standards are more than relics. They are an invitation, a challenge cast across time. They ask us to reconsider the depth of our ancestors' connection to the world and to each other, to see the prehistoric landscape not as a collection of isolated wonders, but as a potential network of intentional meaning. What will we learn when we finally listen to the full symphony these numbers imply? From the carpenter's forearm to the laser's constant light, this has been a journey across the deepest currents of human thought. We have traced the ghostly outline of rulers that once measured continents and mapped the stars, seeing how a simple length could become a bridge between earth and sky, between one culture and another. These lost systems are far more than forgotten tools in a dusty workshop. They are a testament to a profound and possibly shared vision of reality, where geometry was sacred, astronomy was a language, and the earth itself was the ultimate standard. The stones of Stonehenge, the slopes of Giza, and the grids of Teotihuacan all whisper of this integrated understanding, a harmony of number and nature that turned monumental construction into an act of cosmic conversation. Whether born from independent genius sparking in separate lands or carried along ancient highways by wandering masters of the craft, the result was a silent unification. Builders separated by oceans and millennia were speaking the same mathematical dialect, using their local stone to write sentences in a global grammar of proportion. They were seeking order, meaning, and connection, using the only universal language they had, the language of measure. In our own time, this quest has not ended, it has only transformed. Our world is now woven together by digital signals and satellite networks, by a metric system defined by the speed of light. We are still, in our own way, searching for that common language, that shared standard that allows us to build, trade, and understand together on a planetary scale. We are still trying to unify our world, so the next time you pass an old stone wall, a weathered monument, or even the seemingly random layout of an ancient city park, pause for a moment. Look past the moss and the centuries. See it not just as a relic, but as a potential piece of a vast, silent equation. See it as a statement made by people who believed the universe was knowable, measurable, and beautifully ordered, and who left their proof in the only permanent ink they had, stone and earth. Their quest for a unified measure is a mirror held up to our own. If this exploration into the foundations of our world has sparked your curiosity, there are many more historical mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Subscribe to continue these deep dives into the past's greatest puzzles, and let us know in the comments, what do you believe is the most compelling evidence for a lost, unifying knowledge among ancient cultures? Your perspective is part of the next chapter in understanding this enduring human story.